Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how my floor press has carried over to my bench press. Let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Because yeah, I'm really happy with that, because that's a point that was brought up. A lot of people have told me with what I'm doing, that me doing all this floor pressing and not benching for a little while, that my bench would go down. And the funny part is that it went up. And by went up, I don't just mean by like 10 or 15 pounds here. Because most of you remember, or may not remember, a lot of people will kind of look at the footage of me using slightly lighter weights that I did last year, and they'll be like, why are you benching so light and squatting so light? And it's because they weren't following what I've been doing, and that's just stock footage that I have. I didn't do any squatting or any chest pressing for something like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I lost track. I honestly can't tell you whether it was 18 months or 24 months. But I quit doing both. I had done focusing mainly on deadlifting, overhead pressing, chin-ups, rows, things like that, right? A little bit of isolation work. I've been doing some curls and tricep extensions. All of those things, right? But mostly just focusing on those other lifts that I didn't care about them for a while. Then I realized this is not ideal for me in the long term. I want to be a well-rounded athlete again. I want to be strong at a lot of different lifts, and that means that I probably need to master every lift that has a strength standard, and that's a long-term goal for me. And I had set a bunch of goals for the squat and the bench press, but I started rebuilding my bench press. I started with 225 or sets of 5, right? That's where I started at day one, and I didn't build up past 275 on camera. Didn't build past 275 on camera, and actually I didn't go higher than 275 for triples at any point, even before I rotated the floor press in. Well, due to my current training environment, it just wasn't always easier for me to bench press, but I did have a location that I can train at, where I found that I can actually get a bench over to one of the squat racks, because I didn't want to use the non-adjustable racks where I have to unrack at a really long distance. I didn't want to have to rely on spotters for everything. I wanted to be able to have safeties, adjustable J-hooks, and so I found that I actually can do that at one of the gyms I train at regularly, so I started doing that. And I thought, what the hell, let me go in and see what I can bench press. Because I had built my floor press, closed grip floor press, up to 315 last week, I've now had 2 different days where I hit a 225 strict standing press, and that again, that's off the chest. So I decided to go ahead and close grip bench press. Now I've gone from 275 for a triple. That is the absolute heaviest I have lifted. Is 275 for 3 last year, back when I was filming. It's the heaviest I've gone before switching back over to just floor press, which I had been doing 2 to 3 times a week. And even that, I did volume for a while. Even the floor press, I started with 245 for triples and built up. So how did it work out? What did I bench? Well, I started ramping up. It was all easy. I mean, I ramped up 275 for a triple, felt light. I went up to 295 for a single, it felt light. I went up to 315 for a single, paused for 2 seconds on my chest. I didn't even use a spotter because 295 felt so light. I went to 315, held it on my chest for 2 seconds, pressed it. I knew I could probably go another 10% heavier. I didn't. I put on 325, asked a guy to spot me just to be safe. Brought it down, had it on my chest for a 1 count. Again, closed grip. And for me, the closed grip is about an inch into the knurling. So my finger was about 1 inch from the smooths in the middle. So, you know, right about here. It's about where I bench. Come down, press. And I did a 325 for a fairly easy rep. Meaning I feel like I could have got another 10 pounds. Could have got another 10 pounds. And that's my first day back benching. So that's pretty much a 50-pound increase. Now, granted, 3 reps versus 1 rep, 50 pounds difference, but it wasn't a difficult rep. I know I could have done more. Still, with pounds on the bar itself, 50 pounds. I have increased my bench press 50 pounds without doing any bench pressing, and it's not because there isn't specificity there. What people need to remember, certain variations of a lift are just harder, and they might use similar biomechanics. When you go do something like that, like the floor press, again, in my case, I touch the chest on my floor press. It's not a hard touch. I have to arch a little bit to get there, but I'm thick enough that because of my back, and my rib cage, I'm thick enough that I'm able to touch. So for me, the floor press is a full range of motion exercise. And when I went back over to bench pressing and I'm able to use just a little bit of leg drive, because I wasn't using much, I'm now stronger on that than I was on the floor press. So I think what I'm going to do, again, just to get some exercise variation in, because my overhead pressing is starting to stall a little bit, it's getting harder, just to get a press variation back in. Since I did to be benching anyways, I'll probably try to bench press twice a week. Some weeks I might do it 3 days. And I'll obviously keep overhead pressing 3 days a week. But a little bit of exercise variation can help. A little bit can help as long as we're keeping close enough motor patterns to balance things out, building the same muscles up. But yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised with that. Because again, you hear a lot of people say the floor press won't carry over as much as you think it will. Your bench is going to detrain. In this case, bench didn't. It wasn't so much an issue of detraining. It's just an issue of I just built the muscles up and trained myself to do a similar motor pattern to the bench press. So when I went back to the bench press, it was fine. Now the motor patterns may have detrained, because I did spend a couple of months there rebuilding up some basic motor patterns for the bar path and the movement. That probably detrained, which means the gains have been purely hypertrophy. In other words, my triceps, my delts, and my chest have grown. They've grown enough to put 50 pounds on my bench press. And that is the difference that we need to understand. That's a key point when it comes to strength training. Hypertrophy and motor patterns work together to build your strength on a big exercise, on any big barbell lift. And so if you can hypertrophy the muscles in any exercise significantly, particularly if you do it with a compound, because what have we seen in the studies? That compounds increase strength more than isolation movements for the same amount of muscle gains. All right, I've linked studies recently, the last couple months, showing that. This has been looked at. In other words, a leg extension doesn't increase your quad strength as much as a squat does, even if they grow the same amount from it. And it carries over the other direction more. Compounds increase the strength of isolation movements more than isolation movements increase the strength of compounds. In other words, if someone does nothing but leg extensions to build their quads, gets a certain amount of growth, and someone else does nothing but squats to build their quads, and then you test their leg extension strength, the guy who built the quads with squats will be stronger on the leg extension, even with the same amount of muscle gain. And the same thing for triceps, everything else. So the point is using a big, heavy compound movement to add measurable amounts of muscle can increase your big lifts in some cases, even when you don't train them, as long as none of the muscles involved atrophied. And that is a key point when we discuss exercise variation or rotating exercises. In other words, if you switched over to only incline instead of flat bench, and you hypertrophied your triceps and front delts, but your lower chest atrophied slightly, it might not carry over. It might not carry over. But in the case of the floor press, all of the muscles involved are going to get stimulated significantly. They're all primary movers. They all grew as a result of my floor press training. So when I went back to bench pressing, it's putting another 50 pounds on the bar. Now I'll learn a little bit of the motor patterns, right? We'll get some new motor pattern adaptation, which will increase tension. I'll be able to add more weight probably on the bench, and then that will start adding additional hypertrophy again. So again, when we're selecting exercise variations, or you even want to rotate through and take a primary exercise out of the equation, if you want to know how much it's going to affect your performance, again, this is a perfect example. It depends on if it's a close enough movement pattern to maintain some of the motor patterns, and it depends on how much growth you are stimulating in all the primary movers. As long as none of the primary movers lose size, and at least one of them grows, you can probably expect an increase in performance. Now, a lot of that again depends on how much your motor patterns are degraded over time too, though. So that's also the downside of how much do you lose of the motor unit learning on that big lift. In some cases, like I suspect with this on the bench, I probably lost some of the motor unit learning. All right. And the bench I'm grabbing is not a bench that I'm used to benching off of for its height or anything else. So I've got a different motor pattern here to deal with. But in this case, I probably lost strength there, but I've gained so much strength on the hypertrophy end that it doesn't matter, it went up. So there's a lot of ways to look at this and explain how these things work. And it does show, though, that at certain times, this is where exercise variation starts to help. Specificity is king. Specificity is always king, and people know that. But exercise variation for your big compounds through certain phases or rotating through different days can really help well round your strength out. And they reach a threshold to where they can help with plateaus only in the sense that you now have a new training response that can stimulate some additional hypertrophy. And so again, it's all about having a well-rounded set of exercises that you do. And I know that's going to sound contrary to a lot of what I teach, but people need to understand when I'm talking about exercise variations, I'm telling people that probably 5 exercises isn't enough to maximally develop all your musculature and strength. That for a noob it can, but after being a novice, you probably need more than 4 or 5 exercises per week. Probably a good idea. Now, I know people who do differently. And they are still pretty damn strong. I know people right now who only do like 4 lifts who are technically stronger than me right now with my current lifts. Not by a lot, but they are a little bit. So that being said, there can be something to that, but the whole point is that if you want a well-rounded strength, you probably need to master a certain amount of exercise variation. You might need to do as many as 8 to 10 different exercises, over the course of several months. Again, if you want to be more well-rounded and not just be, say, a power lifter. Again, well-rounded strength, which again gives more well-rounded muscle mass through your body also. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.